competition happening online today is the exact same thing that happened when Jesus walked the earth. Men are getting more information about what it means to be a man than any generation in history. Some say being a man means having 6 girlfriends. Some say it's when you can bench 300 pounds. Or maybe it's when you're old enough to buy alcohol. Or how about when you're old enough to drive? I grew up without a clear understanding of the Bible, with the internet constantly putting something in my face that made me think I was missing something or doing life wrong constantly. Then we pair that with this underlying drive men have to build something and to just find some level of meaning in life. Then problems arise when there's no spiritual foundation underneath it, or when the picture of God someone understood was distorted so it didn't make any practical sense. A lot of guys hear be humble or serve others, and honestly, at face value, it seems like that's not how the world works. That confusion is understandable, and we're going to work through it. I'm not some finished, perfect version of what we're going to talk about, but what I can do is point us toward what Scripture actually says about masculinity and focus on the character of Christ. You can think of masculinity like a road. A road has 2 ditches, one on each side. The goal is to stay on the road, but right now culture is pushing men into one of the 2 ditches and calling it the destination. The first ditch is what is called the red pill or the alpha male movement. Online, alpha usually means sunglasses indoors and a podcast mic. You've probably seen it. The guys online who talk about dominance, never showing weakness, and about women being targets to conquer, about taking what's yours, and about the world being a competition where only the ruthless survive. The second ditch is the opposite extreme. Some guys are in this ditch and don't even realize it. They can just wonder why life feels so discontent. This can happen in a lot of different ways. Failure that stuck around longer than expected, rejection, social or romantic, whatever it was. And without a real foundation to come back to, a lot of men just drift. Culture fills the gap or other people's opinions. Past experiences start writing the story for life, and at some point it doesn't even feel like it's your story anymore. The modern world makes that drift really easy. Temporary stimulation is everywhere, so guys end up numb, people-pleasing, and ultimately, life conquers them instead of them conquering life. And what's interesting is that in many cases, the men in ditch 2 can idolize the men in ditch 1. Here's what's actually driving both of those patterns, because they look different on the surface, one aggressive, one withdrawn, but they share the same root: an identity that isn't anchored to anything stable. When a man doesn't have a settled answer to the question, who am I and what am I for, it's common to borrow from whatever's available. And right now, what's available is a constant stream of content, most of it built on one of those 2 frameworks. And the one book we actually need on masculinity, the Bible, often sits around and collects dust. There's a passage in Mark 10 worth sitting with, because the competition happening online today is the exact same thing that happened when Jesus walked the earth. His disciples, and yes, his disciples, had been arguing about who gets to be the greatest, who gets the seat of honor, and who has the most authority. Jesus responds, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over to them, and their great ones exercise authority over them." That's Rome, Caesar, and the governors, men whose entire identity was built around the ability to make other people smaller. The Greek word behind lord it over is katakuriaosen. It means to exercise dominance downward, power that only functions by keeping everyone beneath you. That was the Roman model. That system hasn't gone anywhere. It just found a camera. The whole culture of performing dominance for an audience, men drooling over whoever seems the most powerful and consuming content all day on how to be on top, that's the same template Jesus was describing 2,000 years ago. Control dressed up as strength. The crowd mistakes the performance for the real thing. It looked impressive then too. Then Jesus says, But it shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. And then he closes with this: For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Every word in that sentence is carrying weight. Son of Man. That title comes from Daniel 7. It's a figure-handed dominion over all nations by God himself. That's not a humble title. That's the highest authority in existence. Jesus is claiming that authority and saying that it was expressed through sacrifice, not control. And then that word ransom. In Greek, it's lutron. It appears only twice in the entire New Testament. In the ancient world, a lutron was a purchase price, specifically the price paid to free a slave or a prisoner of war, a legal transaction. Something of equivalent or greater value exchanged to secure someone else's release. Jesus paid the price we couldn't pay. That's the weight behind the word. And the person who paid it cleared the temple, stood before Pilate, confronted the religious leaders. There was nothing passive about him, but every bit of that strength was pointed outward. And I want to make sure servant doesn't get lost in religious language, because in real life, it's more practical than most people think. Think about a contractor. He could cut corners on a house just to turn a profit, get in, get paid, and move on. Or he could do it right because he knows a family is going to live there. Same job and paycheck. One of those men is oriented toward himself, the other is oriented toward something beyond himself. Same thing with content creation. You could put something out just to grab attention and make money. Or you could actually believe that what you're making could change how someone sees their life. Same camera and upload, but a different reason. That's what service looks like in ordinary life. Not necessarily a grand gesture, just an honest question about where your heart is actually pointed. But there's another side I don't want to skip because it's the harder part. Scripture also describes genuine sacrificial giving, where there's no return. This is just giving because someone needs it and you have something to give. The thing is that also this gets distorted into the idea that a man can't have anything, build anything, or has to constantly be depleted to be faithful. That's not the picture either. Most of it comes down to discernment. Knowing when you're building something that genuinely serves others through what it produces. Knowing when the moment calls for giving freely with nothing coming back, and being honest enough with yourself to tell the difference. So now we have covered the distorted picture and what the right model points toward. The question is, where does it actually come from? What's the foundation underneath it? For that, we have to go back to the beginning. Most of y'all have heard this, but we're going to look closely at what is often not thought about much. So God created mankind in his own image. This is the foundational statement of what a human being is. So I want to be careful here because this phrase gets used a lot and it can start to feel abstract. So let's make it concrete. To bear the image of something means to reflect it and represent it. When a coin bears the image of a king, it goes out into the world as a representation of that king's authority. It's not the king, but it points to him. That's the idea. You were placed in this world as a representation of God. Your life is designed to point to something beyond itself. That's a completely different foundation than dominance or other people's opinions. Your identity has a source that existed before the internet, before whoever else told you what you should be or what you couldn't be. That's what this course is built on. In the next lessons, we're going to go deeper into what that actually means for masculine character development, what you build, and how you approach life from that foundation.